finally, we have the announcement. Jon Jones has retired. And there's a lot of interesting and, moving parts in this situation, or that were leading up to the announcement. So we're just going to discuss. I'm going to give my opinions on it, just detail what was going on. And yeah. So from what we understand, Ariel revealed that the UFC met Jon's offer of $30 million, right? Jon was like, I want $30 million to fight Aspinall, right? And the UFC met that offer. They called this bluff. So Jon accepted the fight. I was like, okay, give me 6 months. So they pushed back the date to like November, December, right? They can't do it on International Fight Week. And then eventually he's like, actually, I don't want to fight Tom. Obviously, just because either he squared up with him or he just realizes it's not a good matchup, regardless, right? All this stuff with Jon. He goes back on that offer and he's like, I am no longer fighting Tom. It was expressed that Jones wasn't necessarily not interested in fighting anymore, very specifically Tom. And I guarantee I'm willing to bet this entire channel, if they offered any other name, he would take it. Any other name, he would fight. Right? Not for 30 million, just a normal payday, he would fight them. Now, Dana accidentally slipped up a few times and was like, yep, the fight's done, the fight's made. It's happening. At UFC 316, just 2 weeks ago, he was saying, yep, it's a done deal. And then he came out eventually and was like, yeah, we'll know in the next couple of weeks. And then here on it, UFC Baku, which was a terrible fight night card that's on Baku time. I'm not even going to pronounce Azerbaijan, but it was at like 5 a.m, at least for me. And a different time for the US. So he was essentially hiding when making this announcement. And he said, Jon Jones is retired. Tom Aspinall's the heavyweight champion. Simple as that. He said Jon called him yesterday and announced that he retired. Now, there's a few things that could have happened. First of all, Dana looks pissed. You can see on the look in his face, the fact that he's kind of hiding the announcement, and the fact that it was on some random card, that he is really, really, really angry. And eventually he's probably going to come and say, yeah, he just didn't want to fight. We can't force him to fight. And that's how you know that Dana's pissed off and saying that someone's talking. But he was not happy. He kept it short. He kept it simple. So yeah. Now, I don't think that Jon retired. MMA Guru has a very good theory as to what happened. He thinks Jon retired, but he thinks that recently Jon went on the Nelk Boys podcast while drunk, and one of them asked, oh yeah, what would it take for you to fight Aspinall? And he literally just walked out as soon as that question was asked. And Guru thinks that he, went home drunk, angry, and when he was emotionally called the UFC and said he's retired. Now, I don't think this is the case. I don't think Jon would retire now. And let me tell you why. He is about 2 months from breaking Cain Velasquez's record as the longest reigning heavyweight champion. And for Jon's ego and his pride and just his narcissistic personality, I do not think that Jon would retire willingly before reaching that achievement. Now, what I do think happened is the UFC stripped him, and they don't want to announce it because, frankly, it looks terrible, especially because of that petition going around. If they were to actually openly strip him, that's a terrible look on Dana White and the company. So it's easier if Jon just retires, and Jon doesn't care if he gets stripped anyway. So the UFC decided to announce it as his retirement, because I also don't think that they want to give Jon any other fight if he wants to come back, unless it's Aspinall, or if he just wants to take another fight right now. Because Jon has openly said, he does want to fight people, just not Tom. So I think that they actually just don't want to give him any fights other than Aspinall, and they're just finally putting their foot down. And it's obviously it's disappointing that we didn't get Jones versus Aspinall, but, as long as the heavyweight division can get moving, it's finally in a position where it can get going again. Aspinall will probably fight Cyril Gane somewhere in September. They might change that September Paris card to a pay-per-view because September doesn't have a pay-per-view. and you can get a good pay-per-view, first pay-per-view in France, see how it goes. But that should be pretty interesting. Now, also what I think had to do with John's quote-unquote retirement was he has gotten in some legal trouble again. Another hit-and-run sort of incident where he got into a crash, fled the scene. This happened back in February, but it's only just going to, I believe, court, or it's only just being filed now. So that actually could have a lot to do with the announcement. Maybe either John was like, okay, I've got to focus on this, or the UFC is like, okay, that's enough, John. Have a nice time. But it could definitely play into account with what's going on. And for John, looking back at his career, obviously he is a very, very good fighter. He's top 5 of all time. But I can't sit here and say that his legacy isn't stained, not just from not fighting Tom, but from the repeated and continuous PED violations. Keep in mind, he's popped for steroids multiple times and regularly hidden from USADA, and also just straight up had events moved for him to try and compensate for the drugs in his system. He has allegedly beaten his wife. I'm going to say allegedly because, legal reasons. But there is a police report detailing that he did, leave his wife in a pool of a suspicious red liquid. And, the hit and run incident, there was a time where he was in his car, drunk, on the side of the road, and he accidentally fired a gun. A lot of people forget about that. That was the time that he hid under the cage from USADA. And his legacy has just been made up of fighting, past their prime, light heavyweight / middleweight fighters, and then, going tooth and nail with subpar competition at light heavyweight towards the end of his reign. And his heavyweight run was an absolute embarrassment, to be quite frank. And both of the most dangerous matchups and exciting matchups that he could have had at heavyweight, he dodged. He ducked Ngannou for 3 years. Just to come in with a beer belly, essentially. And then Aspinall, we know what happened there. But it's a very bad look for the UFC. But hopefully they can get things moving again, and we can finally get back to a state of normalcy in the heavyweight division, and I'm sure everyone's really, really glad about that. But anyway, guys, I just wanted to discuss this as it was a pretty big announcement. But yeah, John should not be the one representing the sport. George St. Pierre, Demetrius Johnson, Jose Aldo, even Anderson Silva are much, much better representations as the greatest of all time in the sport, not only for their skills and their achievements, but also their ethics, morals, and what they represent for the sport. But I just wanted to bring this all to light, just discuss it a little bit. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll see you guys later.